toe of frog, will of bat, tongue of dog.
Adder's fork and blindworm's sting.
Barbados lime is just the thing.
Craig's sword like a sailor's stubble.
Flip the switch and let the cauldron bubble.
Welcome to the Final Girls podcast, where we explore the intersections of horror film and feminism. In this first series, we're bringing on special guests to dive deep into film and TV shows with witchcraft at the heart of them. I'm Anna, co-founder of the Final Girls and your podcast host. Okay, warning, we're gonna get cheesy in this episode. It's Valentine's Day, and I couldn't resist talking about one of my very own childhood favorites, Practical Magic. It's a mix of rom-com, horror, fantasy, drama, and it's weird as hell and very much peak 90s. The story centers on Sally and Gillian Owens, that's Sandra Bullock and Nicole Kidman respectively. The latest in a long line of witches who bear a particular curse. Any man who dares to fall in love with an Owens woman will meet an untimely death. Sally is a sensible, introverted and more powerful one of the two, while Gillian is fun-loving, seductive and impulsive. When they grow up, Gillian leaves for Los Angeles while Sally stays in their sleepy seaside town with their two wisecracking, meddling aunts, the very fantastic stalker Channing and Diane Wiest. She falls in love with the local grocer and of course he dies. Meanwhile, Gillian gets involved with an abusive, quote-unquote Transylvanian cowboy, who they then accidentally kill, and then not so accidentally bring back to life. What follows is both a romance drama, horror film and procedural thriller. It's a lot, and I love it. Not terribly successful upon release, but now having gained a cult following, it was criticized at the time for being too horror for a rom-com and too rom-com for a horror movie. A sort of hodgepodge of genres that critics and audiences at the time didn't quite get. When it was released in American cinemas in 1998, noted film critic Roger Ebert called it too scary for children and too childish for adults. On the one hand, you have cute witches making jokes about magic potions and herbal shampoos, and on the other hand, you have kidnapping by an abusive boyfriend who dies of an overdose, but not for long. Moldy evil spirits rise up from other people's bodies, and teaspoons stir on their own. There's a wonderful cheesy soundtrack, there's great 90s outfits, there's a drunken dance scene, there's some very creepy dudes, there's murder, necromancy, possession. I definitely encourage you to check it out for yourself. I'm joined in this episode by film critic and 90s rom-com pundit Rhianna Dhillon to dive into the deeply enjoyable hot mess that is Practical Magic. Thank you so much for doing this, Rhianna.
Not at all. I'm excited. Thank you for asking me.
I love that you're now the go-to person for non-horror horror films.
I am very happy to be that person. Honestly, I'm delighted that you're not making me watch terrifying horror films.
You know, give me a while. We're still getting to know each other.
Ease me in. Honestly, this is a film that I didn't know about. So not only was I really pleased that it's not like an out-and-out horror, but also the fact that it introduces me to like a whole new cult film, which I feel like I should definitely have seen.
I know, and I love that I grew up on this film and I've loved it since I was a preteen, and you hadn't seen it. So tell me about your first...
Or heard of it.
I'm really sorry. I mean, I still really want to like you.
Okay, but think of it this way. You introduced me to Practical Magic.
Yeah,
that will always be you now.
Yes, okay.
Like people are like,
thank you.
Rhianna, I mean, how did you come by Practical Magic? And I'd be like, it was all the work of Anna.
So what did you think? You watched it for the first time?
Yeah. So I was absolutely thrilled that it was Sandra Bullock, because I love her, especially this Sandra Bullock era as well. I think she's just like so beautiful. She has that perfect combination of like being girl next door and quite sexy in a knows it but not in a arrogant kind of way. Still just very wholesome, I suppose. She's like very wholesome in these sorts of films. And then Nicole Kidman, who I thought was kind of, I mean, I thought, yeah, she was we see less of her, and we see less of her especially at the beginning. So when she comes into it and she's so like that sort of badass, doesn't give two fucks about anything kind of character, which kind of threw me, but loved it. I think it worked really, really well, because I guess her edge is actually quite a nasty edge.
Okay.
Nicole Kidman's character. And I wasn't expecting it to go quite so dark with her, but I really enjoyed that they went there.
And what about the other characters?
So I wrote some notes, and I've written OMG the men in capital letters, because like as each one came into it, I was like, holy fuck.
I mean, I was actually talking about the aunts, but yeah, let's go there. I see where your mind is today.
I mean, I watched this morning and I haven't stopped thinking about one scene in particular. So
okay, but
we can go with the aunts though, because Stockard
Channing.
I mean, Stockard Channing is just wonderful in everything, and she's always like the best character in everything. But what I love about this is her character of Aunt Frances is that it sort of feels to me like a precursor to her character in The Good Wife, where she plays this like rebellious alcoholic. And she just fits this role so well, where she has this real kind of, you know, kindly nature about her. She's actually quite nurturing in the film to a certain extent, but then equally is a witch.
And is super sassy and
snappy.
And
is so sassy. And her and Diane Wiest's relationship is just spot on. Like they've got such good chemistry and they balance each other out, but not to the extent of it being good witch, bad witch. Like that's not, you know, it's never like
they're
black
more
and
like
white.
Bickering sisters that have lived together for a very, very long time. Oh my god, what's the name of those two sisters, the twins in The Simpsons? Patty and Selma in The Simpsons.
Patty and Selma, yes. It's like with a fag hanging out of that, except it's like like a cauldron hanging off one of their arms. Or
I mean they do smoke, but they have that, they smoke in those like elongated
cigarette holder
filter holder thingies that make them
like
look,
Cruella de Vil
smoke. And they look very bougie and sort of like they're not actually smoking.
And they sort of transcend eras as well. Like they dress like 19th century with these fabulous like bonnets and dresses and parasols, just walking around like, I don't know, Middle America or.
But then have like Joan Collins hair. Which is like a right combination.
Yes, it's so true. It was just really weird seeing them, and then like Sandra Bullock prancing around in these little denim like 90s shorts, and I was like, hold on, what's happening here? But yeah, I thought they were brilliant. But
to come back to what you really wanted to talk about.
The men.
OMG
the men. So like, first of all, who is it? It's Mark Furst. I can never pronounce his name.
Furstein? Oh, yeah. I always confused him with the guy who played the stalker dude in Love Actually. I always thought it was the same
Andrew
guy.
Lincoln.
Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting, because Andrew Lincoln was like my number one pin-up as a teenager, in teachers specifically, Channel 4 drama teachers. And you're so right, he does look like him. And I've clearly got a massive type here, because as soon as he came on screen, I was like, oh my God, it's that guy who was also in Her Shoes.
Yes.
He sort of has that sexy nerd thing going on in Her Shoes especially. And in this, he doesn't really speak. He doesn't really have any dialogue.
He really is much more of an object, isn't he?
Yeah, he's just like a sexy husband.
Yeah, he's very much kind of husband material.
Yes.
Like hunky but approachable.
Yeah.
Does a lot of manual labor. He's always lifting boxes.
Oh my God. So all those apples, yeah.
And I love that. I didn't clock this until I became older, really. But Sandy Bullock just sees him.
Yeah.
Likes him.
Uh-huh.
And then about 3 minutes later, they're married with 2 kids.
Yes. It's so funny.
We don't really get to hear him speak at all.
No, he literally has no lines. And because she like glances at him and then trips over, and then the aunts put a spell on her to just make her a little bit more. It's not like a love potion, is it? I think it's more to make her a bit more confident.
I think they put a spell on them both to sort of like
Pull
connect together.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it gets a bit sad because, you know, he does die, but At one point, I think they just wanted to get her to sleep with someone.
Yeah.
That's all they wanted. They
Yeah.
wanted her to have sex.
The aunts.
Yeah.
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 Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm now just fantasizing about this actor. He's just really, again, perfect
He's
guy
at his
next
peak.
door.
Yeah.
They're a really great looking couple together. And then when she like runs towards him in the street, and is it like Faith Hill's?
Yes, it is.
This kiss. And then she jumps on him and he holds her. And it's so like teenage fantasy dream, isn't it?
It's like the sort of cinema kiss that you would imagine a teenage girl would fantasize
100%.
about, not a grown-ass
No.
woman. But it
However,
still works.
Yeah. Now that we've both seen that, that's all I'm going to be thinking about. But also, I have quite a fear of like being lifted. Like it's just like a phobia. Like I really hate being lifted off the ground.
What?
So whenever I see other women doing that, like in films, I'm like, oh, they're so like light and waif-like, and if I did that to someone, I'd break their back and crush their skull when they fell over. So that for me, that genuinely is a fantastical element of just, I could never do that in real life ever.
And the other man in this.
Yes. So when Aidan Quinn comes on, I mean, first of all, I've always had a bit of a penchant for a sexy detective anyway.
Who doesn't?
Right. When he comes on, I was like, oh, really?
Why do you say that? Did you first meet Aidan Quinn, I mean, on screen, as kind of an older man?
Yeah.
Okay, because I first saw him in this, and he's always remained the hunky Southern detective for me.
Right, okay, fair enough. But even in that, he's still quite... How old is he in it, do we think?
Do you know what seems wild?
I think he's nearly 40 or something.
You know what seems wild?
What?
The fact that they're sort of age appropriate.
You know.
Because Santi and Nicole in this are not 22. So...
This is, yeah, fair. I mean, still bloody young. But yeah, so Aidan Quinn, what I really liked about him, so with the other guy, it was like an immediate, like, fuck yeah, I see it, as did she.
Mm-hmm.
With Aidan Quinn's character, it was like this slow build up, like this slow burn of tension and flirting and just so much chemistry, and that sort of forbidden interest in each other, because obviously Sandra Bullock's character is a prime suspect in a murder case that he's investigating. All of this is like a million shades of wrong, and yet again, that tension, that build up is so hot that when the payoff comes, it's even more worth it, and it makes so much more of an impact than the first one for me. Like that made everything go tingly when
That's the scene that you're talking about. Come on,
they're in the
describe
bedroom.
scene.
They're in the bedroom. She's basically just confessed to him that she's killed Goran Vizhnit's character, and Jimmy, that she's just confessed that her and her sister have killed Jimmy. And he turns off like this microphone to sort of say, don't talk without a lawyer now. But look, I can help you. And they're getting closer and closer. And then he just like rams her against a wall and snogs her face off, and it's just it's like that 90s wet dream kiss, that it's just so charged and so naughty and incredibly passionate. And I really miss seeing kisses like that on screen, because it just, or maybe it's because it does have that nostalgia linked to it, although I didn't see it like you did when I was a kid. I saw enough films growing up that immediately took me back to seeing those sorts of kisses for the first time, and how exciting they were, and how I couldn't wait to be a grown-up so I could kiss like that, you know?
Yeah, no, I do know.
But you had all this when you were growing up, so
I have to admit, I did not focus so much on the kissing.
it was all the witch stuff.
It was all the magic. I was a nerd.
Yeah, I was all about the kissing.
But I do remember because one of the really interesting things about kind of Sally, who is Sandy Bullock's character, and Gillian, who's Nicole Kidman's character, is that all they want to do is fall in love.
Yeah.
That's kind of their whole driving purpose. It's not who they are. They are very different types of women, and they do different stuff, and they lead their own separate lives. But even kind of the whole... we'll get to the magic in a bit, but their whole driving force is, we want to fall in love.
Yeah.
but their approach to love is very different. And the spell that Sally casts as a teenage girl, super fucking cute.
Oh my God.
Like,
it was adorable. But it was also, wasn't that as a sort of...
a defense mechanism.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like she made up the ideal man that could not exist for her. And Aidan Quinn was that man.
You will hear my call a mile away. You'll whistle my favorite song. You can ride a pony backwards.
What are you doing?
Summoning up a true love spell called Amas Veritas. He can flip pancakes in the air. He will be marvelously kind. His favorite shape be a star. And he'll have one green eye. And one blue. Thought you never wanted to fall in love. What's the point? The guy I dreamed of doesn't exist. And if he doesn't exist, I'll never die of a broken heart.
Which is, I mean, adorable. That payoff was gorgeous, and I
Really
I
was.
also wasn't really expecting it, stupidly, but it was just so incredibly sad for me seeing this little girl already not wanting to get her hopes up too high because of what's happened to her parents, and you know, there's this history, you know, family of all the men dying. And so just that I thought was like a real like tragic, even though it was like a really beautiful moment, it was so isolating for this poor little girl. I felt so sorry for her.
I mean,
Go on, say it, do it.
I used to do that thing when I was a little girl.
Did you make up like the perfect man though, thinking that you'd never get him? Surely not.
I can't remember.
Oh, whatever. Bollocks. Absolute bollocks. Come on. What was the spell?
I did the same thing that they do in the movie. I saw this film in cinemas when it was out. I saw it as like a horror film, so I was a little bit scared.
Oh, okay.
And it was scary because there's a whole lot of like violence.
Yeah.
There's, you know, resurrection. There's a zombie. There's ghosts and shit. Like it's got horror elements to it.
Yeah.
But then I remember the little spell thing that I had on a VHS.
Oh.
Then I had it on DVD.
Just picture like a little Anna like in front of
did.
it with your bowl of petals.
I did do it in front of my window in my childhood bedroom. I did have to just throw the petals.
them, yeah.
They wouldn't float, which I found excruciatingly sad.
You should have just done it on a really windy day.
I tried.
Oh.
They didn't float.
Oh, such a
But I
shame.
was convinced I was a little witch because of just how much I fucking love this movie.
So cute. So it had a
Or
real
isolating.
impact on you. No, I didn't mean about the spell
joking.
itself. Hey, we've all been there. But I mean more just, about the tragedy, the reasons behind that.
Yeah.
But I think that's adorable that you used to do that. When did you stop doing that?
Who said I did? I'm more of a Jillian now, though.
Yeah. I've been out with you, I know.
Okay, first of all, by the way, the fucking talent in this film is out of control.
Yeah.
Because the baby girls, no, they're preteen girls, are Camille Bell and, Evan Rachel Wood plays Sandy Bullock's daughter later on.
Yeah,
but
Kylie, yeah.
the teen girls who play kind of the younger versions of Sally and Gillian, they instantly already kind of, you see their different personalities based on, you know, Sally says, I never want to fall in love, and she does that whole spell.
Yeah.
And Gillian is like, oh, I can't wait.
Yeah.
I can't wait to break some hearts and kill some men in a roundabout way, which is quite interesting.
Yeah. They had very clear, defined roles.
What did you think about feisty Nicole Kidman in this?
You go on such a journey with her character, with Gillian, because when the film started, you know, I knew there were going to be some dark elements, but I wasn't expecting that to be domestic violence. And although from the beginning, you know, Goran Visnitz, who I've loved in ER, like I was very excited that he was in this film as well. But from the off, you know, it's because there's like that element of S&M in their relationship. Like the first thing you see is him blindfolding her, and I mean, it's all very hot, very sexy. But you know he's a bad boy from the off. He's got black hair.
She even tells that. Yeah. He's like, he's a bad boy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like you say, he's got black hair.
Yeah, like that's
he's got black hair and rings.
And probably a bit of eyeliner as well.
And he smokes.
Oh,
it's very bad.
He's so beautiful.
He does look great smoking though. It's disgusting. Also black hair, blue eyes.
Yes. Also, he was in like last week's episode of Doctor Who.
Was he?
Yeah. So I hadn't seen him on screen since probably ER.
So you haven't seen him as like young?
Well, I think
was he
young
youngish in ER?
Ish, but not this
ER.
young.
Okay.
Definitely not this young. So yeah, it was quite weird seeing him like twice at different stages of his career within like a week. Very sexy, obviously, but as I say, a bad boy, naughty. And but then you think, oh, that's great, that's cool, that's fine, until he suddenly becomes like a really nasty, evil piece of work. What I loved about Gillian is that she, you know, the first time this happens to her, that he hits her, she calls for help. Like, there isn't a pattern of abuse that she's like trying to cover up or hide. Like, you get the impression that the very first time it happens, she rings her sister. Yeah. And she even says to the cop, like, if you touch me once, I'm out of there. Yeah. Essentially. Which I think actually is a really powerful, like, important message that I don't think we see enough in films. Often we see victims of domestic abuse and violence go through it again and again.
Yeah, you see the pattern.
Yeah, and of course that does happen. But I just think it was a really great message to send. You know, it's horrendous that it happens at all, but if it happens, leave immediately.
Yeah.
And then of course they kill him, which also a great message.
Gillian's whole relationship with Jimmy is quite toxic from the very start, because you know, she wants him, but once again we get that very interesting vibe for a 90s horror rom-com, that it's the women who sort of spot the man and they're like, I want that. Yeah. And I'm going to have that. Yeah. And then they get them sort of, we never see them flirt, we never see them establish a relationship. We just go full on into it. Yeah. Which I think we're much more used to seeing kind of male characters get the women in that way, sort of wordlessly.
It's true.
Gillian and Jimmy, even when she's sort of boasting about their relationship, which is mostly sexual anyway, she's like, oh yeah, I drug him sometimes so I can get some sleep.
Yeah, because the sex is too frequent and too much. And yeah, I know.
Yeah, I don't know why she's complaining, but still. Still. Fine. Okay.
But you're right. Like, again, that was a line I was like, oh, Nicole.
Angela, what kind of name is that? Bulgarian. Bulgarian?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's from somewhere near Transylvania. He has his whole Dracula cowboy thing about him. He's just so intense. I mean, he talks about our relationship in terms of centuries. Sometimes we just stay up all night worshiping each other. Like bats. Thank God for Jet's belladonna. Or I'd never get any sleep.
Why are you taking that stuff?
I'm not using it. I'm just giving it to him every now and then, that's all.
So you're drugging your boyfriend to get a little shut-eye?
Like, Nicole having all the sex and, you know, reveling in it. I just think it's so great that we're seeing that, like, in those, like, 90s films, you're hearing and seeing about women enjoying sex. However, there is that element of the sexy one, or the one that's having the sex, has to be punished. Yeah. Which is
problematic.
Very problematic.
Yeah. And the fact that, you know, we're going to talk about the whole film, kind of spoilers included, but the fact that she does then get into this abusive sort of relationship.
Yeah.
And absolutely agree with you. She does call for help the minute it happens. But then also she's the one who insists on resurrecting Jimmy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite sure whether that's more to avoid being punished for a crime.
Yeah.
Or because she wants him back regardless.
So when she tries to like wake him up in the car and she seems really desperate for him to be awake or to get with it, I was a bit like, just leave him. Like, why? He's just been trying to strangle you. You've got every reason to try to kill him. So that felt more like about their relationship. Whereas when she actually resurrects him, I was like, oh, it's just because they can say, well, he's got a heartbeat now, so I didn't murder him. And she does also say, as soon as he is alive, I'm going to break up with him. And she immediately says that. I'm dumping him as soon as he's awake.
Okay, Jimmy. I will get you out of this. But when I do, we are definitely breaking up. It is over.
And so again, it's like a bit flippant, but you sort of hope that there isn't any other motivation there.
What do you think about the way that the film presents these women's relationship with death anyway? The whole Owen's curse is that any man that falls in love with an Owen's woman will die prematurely. And, you know, even Gillian's Jimmy dies for, you know, due to, well, murder.
Yeah.
What do you think about kind of their relationship with grief and death and that trauma? Because Sally, I found in particular, sort of really blames magic and their family and their sort of magical legacy on losing her husband.
And her father.
Yeah.
There is like, she absolutely rejects magic because that's, and understandably, like if that's the reason why her father and then the love of her life has been killed, it is... Yeah, it is really, I mean, again, it's like their story is so tragic. From the beginning, when you see Marie abandoned on this island, waiting for her love to come to her, and he never does.
She builds him a fucking house, and he doesn't turn up.
He fucking ghosted her. What a prick.
She built a house pregnant on an island after surviving a hanging.
I mean...
Sorry, now that I'm older, I'm like, excuse me.
Yeah.
For more than 200 years, we Owens women have been blamed for everything that has ever gone wrong in this town.
Is that why people hate us so much, Aunt Frances?
They don't hate us, sweetheart. We make them a little nervous.
Let's face it, Jet, we Owens women have always created a stir. It all began with your ancestor, Maria. She was a witch, the first in our family. And you, my darlings, are the most recent in a long and distinguished line.
Is that why they wanted to hang her? Because she was a witch?
Well, the fact that our Aunt Maria was a bit of a heartbreaker didn't help. Nor did it help that most of her lovers had wives on a hanging committee. But no, I don't think it was either of those reasons. They feared her because she had a gift. A power that has been passed on to you children. She had the gift of magic.
It's horrendous. And so, like, of course she's going to hate it. But it's interesting how she hates men and uses her magic. And then all these generations later, it's Sally who hates magic and craves men. And
do you think
love.
Maria hates men, or she just hates the feeling of needing someone else that bad that she herself would feel the heartbreak?
Well, I guess the fact that she puts a curse on
her entire lineage.
Yeah. It means that everyone else will have to go through the heartbreak that she feels. So actually it's a huge punishment on the females as much as the men.
Yeah, you are right.
In the line, it's the nastiest act almost within the film, even though it's born out of something so sad and tragic, and you know, that desperation and fury and again isolation. And I suppose just in that moment, she's not thinking about 400 years later.
Yeah.
This is what's still going on.
Also, just assuming that every single Owens woman is going to be straight.
Well, that's also what came up in my head quite a lot in this, because I wondered if they were going to take it down. I was like, oh no, it's the 90s. No, they're not. No.
Am I right in assuming that you're a big 90s rom-com fan?
Yes.
How do you think this film fits into those?
I
into
think
that
there
moment?
is so much. I don't mean like tropes, but there are a lot of similarities. There are a lot of overlaps. There are a lot of things that I recognised, which I, in a really positive way, like the midnight margaritas scene. I just thought that was a perfect 90s rom-com moment, because it wasn't about the men. It wasn't about love. It was about the females in the family. It was about the aunts and the two lots of sisters, the aunts and the nieces, just coming together in that moment with booze and dancing. And it just made me so happy. Honestly, it was like euphoric. It was, and like the lime and the coconut like kind of going on in the background. It was just really unexpected. And so like these moments amongst like all quite, deep and stuff that really has a message and something to say, you do get these moments of silliness, and I think that's really important.
You know, they were actually drunk when we were filming that.
No, I did not know that, really.
Yeah, they were. It makes it so much better.
I mean, I just always want Stockard Channing to be a bit drunk. Yes. So I think that's when she's at her best.
And what do you think? I mean, that's such a beautiful moment in the film, but it says also a lot of things about sort of sisterhood and female communities and those spaces. What did you make of those?
I think what they did with they set up, I mean, it was a little bit over the top, but when they set up how the whole of the village like shuns Sally for being a witch, and how all these like years later the children are still singing the same songs.
Yeah, the witch, you're a bitch.
Yeah.
And,
and Sally's just like, you'd think they'd have thought of a better rhyme by now. And so the fact that hatred is handed down to children, I think that's quite an important message now. So there's that aspect of all these women and mothers judging her as a mother and as a woman. But then, that turns on its head when they become her coven. And that's what I think that was such a great finale, which I didn't see coming. But just having all of these women, including Margot Martindale, character actress, if we watch BoJack, and it's very exciting.
Chloe Webb as well.
Yes.
Who was most famously Nancy instead of Nancy.
Of course.
Yeah.
So having these women come together in a moment of crisis, because there's a bit of curiosity, but also the fact that another woman has asked for their help. And so whatever their background, whatever their circumstances, whatever's, all the shit that they've gone through in the past, that another woman asking for help brings them all together. I loved that. What a great ending.
And I love that, what did you think of the fact that in order for them to come together to help Sally and the Owens, Sally had to, quote unquote, come out as a witch? So kind of embrace.
Oh yeah, they actually use that term, don't they? Come out. That was a bit weird, because I thought they all sort of knew that she was anyway. So the fact that she had to come out. I mean, we're recording this on the day that Philip Schofield has come out. And so that's been in the news a lot. And we've been talking about the fact that I don't want to say the fuss that's been around it, but it's like in this day and age, the fact that it's a news item. It's been a news item from morning till night about the fact that a man is gay is actually, it's still quite frustrating, as though that's newsworthy, a man's sexuality. It absolutely shouldn't be. So there is that element of that within the film, I guess, of just like, did she have to? Because I thought we all knew that. Yeah. I don't mean that about Philip Schofield, but I mean about how, they've all called her a witch. So I guess the fact that she has to embrace it herself, I don't know. I had mixed feelings about that.
Yeah, I think that's probably next to the fact that this is it's extremely wide, it's extremely straight as a film. Those are the things that kind of have aged less well about it, but also kind of place it very much in and of its time.
Yeah, very nice.
And that, might be the only way that it even implies that there might be other sexualities. It's not just white women falling in love with white men, basically, which is what the Owens seem to do.
Yeah. Yes.
And then get punished for it.
Yeah.
Moving on kind of to more the genre bending stuff. So it feels very 90s rom-com.
Yeah.
But then it has quite a lot of horror elements to it as well. And one of the things that was quite interesting of reading the reviews of the time about it was that people didn't really seem to know what to make of it at that time. I think one of the really interesting reviews was by Roger Ebert, who called it too scary for children and too childish for adults. And sort of that it went from romance to horror to comedy way too much. So you could never really make anything out of it.
Right.
What did you think about the way that it mixed all of those genres?
I am always a fan of mixing it up when it comes to genres. I mean, look at Parasite.
Also recording this on the day that Parasite is out.
Oh yes, yeah. Go see it. I think it's really important that we don't box in our films, and some films do lend themselves really easily to one genre, fine. But the fact that this crossover was so appealing to little Anna, like the fact that you have all these layers to something, that you get these messages through. So you might go and see it for the horror, you might go and see it for the rom-com, and then you'll leave having sort of through osmosis or whatever taken in these tropes or ideas that you wouldn't necessarily come across if you don't seek out those genres. So I think that's really important, and I loved the fact that it's kind of woven in between and the magic that they like, the fact that it's that horror, I suppose, it seems quite gentle to start with because it's like potions and love spells, but then when it becomes about raising the dead and it becomes about ghosts or zombies, and I think for me, like, the turning point is like when is it Kylie or Antonia, one of the daughters,
Antonia.
sees, right?
No, Kylie. It's Kylie. It's baby Evan.
Right.
Evan Rachel Wood.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when she sees Jimmy in the garden and the roses, and I got that was a really creepy moment. Goosebumps, literal goosebumps. It's incredibly creepy because that's when danger kicks in even more. Like, we've had the domestic abuse by that point, but it hasn't been supernatural. So there's only within that circle of where it can go. As soon as it becomes supernatural, you don't know what he can do, where if he's going, and the fact that she can see him, the adults can't, does that mean he's then going to target the children? And that it becomes really frightening. So yeah.
And that image of the Kylie sees, we get like a couple shots, very quick shots of it, of sort of she looks at him through the window, so he's not fully in focus.
No.
But it's just this man standing in their garden watching. That's such a creepy image, especially for women.
Yeah. I mean, so like last week I got followed home from the train station, and he like followed me right to my door, to the gate of my flats, and I didn't want to go inside because I didn't want him to know that I lived there. But just that image has really stayed with me of him outside. It's like a fucking vampire standing outside the gate of my house, just staring at me. And it's horrible because it's so, there's this real territorial thing about it. And that's kind of, Jimmy has this real territorial thing about Gillian, he's like, you're mine. I want you to be my wife.
Yeah, and he tries to brand her at one point.
Oh my God, yeah.
He heats up his ring and tries to physically brand her skin as if she were cattle that belonged to him.
A possession, yeah.
Because he's got this obsession with sort of the Wild West and fancies himself like a vampire cowboy in a way.
Oh, it's fucking free. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that they did that with all, because actually, if you turn that on its head, it could be quite a romantic image of this guy in the garden in a white shirt, a loose white shirt, surrounded by red roses. That's a really romantic image, which they've just completely turned on its head and made it into like the most frightening sort of almost home invasion thing.
You're so right. And it's interesting that it is, I think, also particularly frightening image for women, because women are usually much more subjected to that staring, stalking, following, of trying to invade your space, physical or whatever it is.
Which is why then it's so like powerful when he does physically invade Gillian's space, i.e. her body. Like when that bit when she's in the bed and her, you know, it's like the Exorcist moment, and she's just trying to like purge herself of this monster. And I just I wasn't expecting that sort of element. It crosses so many, like, it kind of ticks so many little boxes of horror, but not in a way that it's like trying to have its cake and eat it. I think it makes sense in the way that they sort of tell the story of him and why he's doing it.
And it's interesting as well that so when they kill him in his car, they take him back to their house and they perform the resurrection spell or ritual, whatnot. I mean, that already is quite gory because they're getting ready. They don't quite do it.
No.
To stick pins in his eyes. That's pretty gory for a film like this.
Yeah.
But like they don't do it, and then they kill him again, bury him in the garden, still on their property. But like their house is such a protective space that when then the fact that they've sort of sullied it with this. And I love that the aunts leave because they're like,
I wanted to ask you about this.
You did that in our house.
Because I was like, they have to bear some of the responsibility because they brought up these children in this space where they're seeing magic, they're seeing them killing animals and resurrecting them and all the rest of it. And so I was like, are you fucking kidding me? They're literally leaving them in the lurch when they're both quite fucked up because their parents died so young. Gillian's really messed up in the way that she's just been through this horrendous trauma, and Sally's husband has died.
And she's been depressed for a weekend and for months.
Yes.
And she's got 2 teenage daughters as well.
2 young girls. And you're leaving them now? And we're supposed to think, like, this isn't, like, solidarity. And I was really shocked. I was genuinely like, what the fuck do you think you're doing? Honestly, I was furious.
I love to see it. I can't say that I remember being that furious.
I really was, because I was going through in my head, like, these, like, you know, the mother figures, again, like, the maternal kind of, because, you know, the guys have never lasted long enough, so we only really get maternal figures in this, and they've just left their children
kind of to teach them a lesson.
Devastated. It really was.
I think we should talk about the house, because the house is unbelievable. Personally, that house, I've never even wanted to live in a house. That's the only house I would want to live in.
Yeah.
I'm always a flat loft person. I never wanted to live in a house because oh my God, maybe it comes from this film. This is like a psychoanalysis session right now.
This.
I hate the idea of someone being possibly outside my window looking in.
Right. So you don't want to be on a ground floor ever?
Ever.
Really?
Never lived on a ground floor. Terrifies me.
Interesting.
Terrifies me. And maybe it fucking stems from this film.
Maybe. Oh my God, you keep expecting Goran Višnjić to like just turn up in his white shirt and stand outside your window.
I would not kick him out.
Me neither. But no, you're right. Like the shot that really stayed with me is the stairs, because they do this really sort of like hypnotic, but where they, you know, the camera sort of like pans upwards.
It's the vertigo shot.
Yeah.
Where it's doing the zoom in and the focus out,
twisting,
or the other way around. Yeah.
And that's when you realize like the scale of the house, and then there's the whole idea of like the attic and everything that happens up there. The fact that when they resurrect him, it's in the kitchen.
Best kitchen ever.
Really lovely kitchen. What a breakfast bar.
What a sink. And the conservatory.
Yeah.
The one where they grow all the herbs and the plants.
Oh yes. Yeah,
and it's just
like the
full
sort of
of
greenhouse
plants.
that's attached to it. Yeah. And when Sally's just like, they're just herbs.
That's fantastic. What would you make kind of about the way the witches are presented in here? We only really have the Owens, and we kind of are led to assume that they're the only witches in their community. But they all sort of have the same vibe, except Gillian. Although it's interesting to then sort of gets the Owens look at the end of the film. It's sort of like very earthy, very, like we were describing before, like long flowing dresses, lots of lace, lots of gloves, lots of old kind of antique jewelry, lots of necklaces, big hats. How does this kind of fit into the way that because this film also transcends genres, and it's not so much a horror, it takes a lot kind of from other more female-oriented films or more even childlike depictions of witches. How do you think that fits into other witch films that you've seen?
Well, it really reminded me so much of Sabrina. I mean, obviously, like with the aunts bringing up their niece, who is also a witch, with the black cat roaming around. So that, and also the fact that the aunts are kind of kooky and not at all kind of like nasty, apart from leaving them, or like just very sweet, like amiable, approachable women who really care about the love life, and like they're also just like classic aunts. Like I see one of my aunts, she's like, so when are you getting married? You know, it's classic. So they definitely have got that element about them. It's that quite gentle thing. And also, again, like we talked about, like that, the sort of Wicca way of practicing magic. And I like that it's not wands and, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love all that as well. I know you trust me. But I think it works really well for this, where they're always having to sort of exist in plain sight in their community. So the things that they do are, you know, much more natural based. The fact that she's opened this shop, which is all about the products that she's like growing, and it's very organic. But the things that she does, like she can't help herself just because she is incredibly powerful, even though she's tried to, Sally's character, even though she's tried to like repress all the magic for so long, she'll still just stir her tea with magic. You know, like that happens a few times in the film. Yeah. And just little moments like that where it's just can't be helped. But there's no fuss made about it, or pizzazz, or sparks, or whatever. Like when Gillian comes into the school and Sally's name is at the top of all of the trees. We don't see that happen. It's just there. And just, I really like that the magic was never portrayed in a really like ostentatious way until perhaps the end, with like the massive flash of light in a circle. But you needed that to be ceremonial and ritualistic, because it's a very cathartic moment.
And it's kind of a communal coven moment where more women, that's not just the Owens, embrace helping Gillian. Yeah, and it's interesting that the magic is, even though these women aren't magic, that they can further the power of the Owens. But I find the relationship of the sisters to power, and their power being magic, really interesting, because Gillian is the one who really craves it, but we're told that she doesn't have as much natural power as Sally does. And like you say, it just sort of exudes from Sally. Things will just happen around her because she's not directing it towards anything, but it just will happen. But most witch films have, or series like Sabrina, will just have these grand schemes and stakes where, you know, if you don't do this, all of humanity will be doomed, or you're gonna be queen of hell, or this other really big shit will happen. But this is more like, even the fact that their husbands or partners will die still feels quite small stakes, very family based within the family. It's a very domestic film, as you say, on that sort of scale. The fact that we're in the kitchen a lot, in the home a lot, and also the fact that you see the women at the end literally sweeping this man out of their house, I thought was quite an interesting image of domesticity.
you know, there's that thing of witches and their brooms, but then they're used to sweep ashes out, not to fly with, and you know, things like that. So yeah, you're right. There isn't some massive thing that will happen to everybody in the village. Also, we never find out if the kid that the children wish to get chickenpox gets chickenpox.
He does.
Does he?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see this. I was like waiting for it.
There's a scene where we see him and he's completely covered in
Oh my God, I
in
missed
spots.
that. Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
They do.
So like,
fuck that kid.
again, that like every kid has chickenpox. So it's not like it's a life-threatening disease. It's not anything like horrendous that's cursed on him. It's just the fact that he just gets an ordinary illness, like wishing a cold on someone. Yeah. Like it's just really, it's actually quite sweet. Like that she doesn't do anything worse, considering that that's her power. So again, quite every day, even when they're cursing people. You know, doesn't strike him dead, which I'd have been quite tempted to do if someone had been chanting at me and calling me a bitch for like 10 minutes.
You would have absolutely slayed the aunts if they left you with an undead zombie abusive ex-boyfriend staring at you through your window.
Fit he was, yeah.
I mean, problematic Bane.
So much.
I have to do a presentation on problematic Bays. He's going to be fucking on there.
Oh God, he's going to be top of the list. I know.
Do you think that might be one of the reasons why it hasn't really clicked with, I was tempted to say with anyone except me. Do you think that might be one of the reasons why it hasn't really clicked with the horror crowd or even the rom-com crowd? Like, I'm the horror kind, you're the rom-com kind, and you hadn't heard of that.
Hadn't heard of it, no.
So it kind of slipped through the cracks from both ends.
Yeah, it really has. Like, it's never on those lists that you read. It's never talked about in the same way as things like, well, like, you know, I'm not even going to list a whole load of rom-coms, but you all know the ones I'm thinking of. But I don't know, again, if it's because it has that element of nastiness to it, where, so that doesn't, you know, it's almost not nice enough to be a rom-com because it's dealing with something like domestic abuse in a very upfront way. It's not like it happens off screen. He tries to strangle her multiple times. He hits her, you know, it's very prevalent. So I don't know if it's that has kind of made this drop off a little bit. I don't think it flows amazingly well, I'll be honest. And I think there are some bits where I thought the dialogue was maybe a little bit too cutesy for what was going on. And I wanted bits of it to be a bit more grown up. I think there was a bit actually when Sally was writing the letter and I was like, oh God, what is this? This is so dirgy. And then obviously the payoff is the fact that that's the reason essentially why the policeman falls in love with her through reading this letter.
But it does read a little bit like a 13-year-old's letter, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
It's incredibly like childish. I mean, I would have written that like in my diary maybe. But the fact that, you know, she was, as you say, a mother of two writing to her sister this is just a bit over the top. I don't know. So I think for kind of those reasons, which is a shame because I think it's the performances that really elevate this. And it's quite sad that people haven't, like, not enough people have seen Sandra Bullock at her absolute best, being like thrown against a wall and snogged.
Yeah, that's her best performance. Okay. I was gonna say you touch a little bit on the performances, but do you wanna talk a bit more about what did you think about the dynamic between Nicole and Sandra?
So interestingly, and in a weird coincidence, I was reading this article today, I think it was just on BuzzFeed, about sisters in movies. I think it was more specifically twins, but also sisters actually, or siblings. And it was saying that in almost like in so many things, especially in the 90s, when you see siblings on screen, they often fall into this category of one being like the sort of the good one and one being like the rebellious one, and they had like so many quite interesting examples. So in the look of one kind of dressing in a very risque kind of way and the other one being much more reserved, and you know, you can see that so much. It was so interesting that I read that today, having just watched this film, because this immediately falls into that category of Sally wearing these kind of floral long dresses, or sort of
pajamas and pigtails.
Yeah.
When Gillian is like in a tight mini skirt running away with a dude.
Exactly.
With a
having
leather
tattoos
jacket.
on her
Yeah.
breasts and snake tattoos and everything. So yeah, I thought it was really interesting that, you know, this falls into that category of these two sisters almost like played off each other, because there's not room for two sexy girls, or, you know, there's not room for two girl next door. They have to be completely different, because that's how dynamic on film works, right? It's like the opposites attract thing, and that's not just in terms of sexual relationships, but also with siblings and mother and daughter relationships as well. There always has to be that tension between not wanting to go down the same path with everything that you do, which makes sense. Of course, that's where the drama lies and everything. After they'd had this row about the fact that, you know, essentially Gillian had made Sally kill her boyfriend.
Just big favor.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, she should have been a bit more grateful. And she was a bit sort of pathetic about it and was like, you need to sort this out. You need to help me. And she's like, no, fucking sort out your own mess. And then she goes back and she sees her being possessed, and she like runs to her, puts her arm around her, holds her, and then physically is trying to protect her from like then till the end of the film when they're in the circle and everything. I thought that was like a really like lovely, touching, again, maternal moment. But it's always that sort of dynamic of one having to look after the other in terms of sisters. Like there is, and always that's a thing in film, isn't it? There's always these tropes of especially when parents are absent, that one sibling has to be the parental figure, I suppose.
You even see that even in both the versions of Sabrina with Zelda and Hilda.
Yeah, I think again, just like the emphasis on the ending of all these women coming together, something, it had been so sort of centered around these sisters, but it was like the sort of sharing the love thing, and about women coming together and sisterhood and coven. And I really thought that was a lovely ending to the film. I think it worked really nicely.
And then at the end, when they also embrace themselves as witches and they put on the show, which, you know, in hindsight you might think, oh, maybe is that problematic as well?
Yeah,
potentially, where they sort of dress up as stereotypical witches, and they jump off of the roof of their house.
But also it's you know, you can laugh at, it's like them sort of laughing at the stereotype of a witch, because we know that that's not actually what they do and how they dress, and they're almost laughing at the fact that the other villages have sort of thought of them in that way for so long.
I love that you refer to them as villagers.
Villagers, yeah. With their pitchforks. You know, it's like the angry mob gone good, isn't it? I think is just like, you don't see that. I think this flips on its head so many tropes that we see in horror, which I really liked. And it does it in quite a subtle way. It doesn't shout about it.
Like, for example?
Well, just like that. Like, you know, the idea of the angry mob. When you see people coming around, it's never really en masse. Do you know what I mean? It sort of like takes like one or two friends or people on the periphery to sort of come into the circle, and this is all done en masse all together. And again, like hardly any male characters apart from the policeman and Jimmy, like the good, the bad, like the angel and the devil. It's
quite literally.
Yeah.
So one of the things that keeps coming up in these films and series is the idea that a witch, because it's an empowered female figure, must choose between the power or her powers, whichever way they're manifested, or love. What do you think practical magic as a horror rom-com adds to that conversation?
I was thinking about this question on the bus, and I had like quite a good answer, and I was like, shall I write it down? I was like, nah, I'll remember. I can't fucking remember. So Sally has to go on like such a journey with her magic, as much as she does with her relationships. And the fact that she sees them as like pitted against each other is quite obvious, and the reasons for that are quite obvious because she blames magic for the death of her father and the death of her husband, and then also blames the magic for bringing her this perfect man. But the bit that really made me well up was when policeman Gary sort of says about how love, like he wished for the love as well, or like he wished for her, yeah. And so
this little shot of a little boy riding a pony the other way around.
God, stop it. But just like the magic of love, about, you know, that brings together love and magic, that moment. And how
that's so fucking cheesy.
It's so fucking cheesy, but it does, right? Like, it's not pitted against each other anymore, because in that moment, love and magic is intertwined, because love is magic and magic is love.
I can't take you seriously after you just said that. This is a horror podcast, Rhianna.
Don't get me on a fucking
horror
podcast.
Can't say shit like that.
I'm always looking for the magic of love in everything that I watch.
And I gave you a film that's literally a magic rom-com.
Right. But also, like, I just love that it was coming from like this quite like butch policeman. It's just like my heart melted. It was so cute. Anyway, basically, she goes on quite a horrific journey with her powers, because we see what her powers can do, i.e. resurrect a man who is evil, and which nearly kills her sister again through his spirit, but then embracing that banishes him. I mean, yeah, it is a real roller coaster with her powers, but I think because she runs through all of them, that she comes out the other end, obviously realizing that she doesn't have to pit them against each other anymore.
Just gonna have it all.
Yeah,
yeah.
Of course they can. A little bit of witch in all of us, right?
I mean, I can't answer that seriously.
That is in the film. That's a direct quote.
I know. I know. So I obviously can't talk objectively about this film at all. I don't think you can talk objectively about any film in general, but having come to it for the first time in 2020, would you recommend people seek it out?
Yes. Do you know what? I feel like the more I've talking about it has made me like it more. I think my knee jerk was like, it was a bit dated and a bit cheesy, but that I love the performances and the chemistry and like the generational thing of women and all that says. I really loved that. But overall, I did think it was a bit clunky and a bit dated. But actually, if you're looking for it, you can find so much. You can find so much in the rom-com elements and in the horror. I mean, it's, you know, horror, but also like the domestic abuse. Like there's some serious stuff in there.
There's some real life horror and some supernatural horror.
Yeah, and it has a lot to say, actually, which I think people dismiss rom-coms, especially as not having a message or being fluffy, whereas, like, you know, horror is always kind of talking about like the world and what's going on socially. And this, I don't know, this kind of is so relevant still with Me Too and everything that's been happening in the news, that I think it's still really important that women watch it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm so glad I showed you this film.
I am. Thank you. Thank you for just introducing me to all these fucking hot men and a hot Sandy Bullock as well.
Let's not forget hot Nicole Kidman as well.
Yes. She's just not my type.
Okay. Well, I'm going to end this here. Just ruin this friendship forever.
I'm into brunettes. What can I say?
Thank you so much for watching it and for talking to me about it.
Thanks for having me.
And that's it for another episode of the Final Ghost podcast. Please do rate and subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. We're everywhere. You can find out more about what we do on thefinalghost.co.uk and follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Final Ghost UK. You can also follow Rhianna on Twitter at Rhianna Dhillon, and I am on Anna B. Demented. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for more witchy goodness next week.
Angel.